With 68 anime on this tier list alone, not including ONAs, OVAs, and movies for fall 2024, let's not waste any time. It's an easy decision to move shows with little interest and to skip. Then there's anime that might have certain themes or genres that I don't watch, like sports, so that rules out things such as Blue Box. After that, we have ongoing anime like Blue Lock's second season where I don't watch the prequels. And finally, anime that reach the point there's nothing redeeming about them and the latter seasons cannot convince me to return to watching them. I'm specifically looking at Aura Ferrata and Seven Deadly Sins for this. If there's something I skipped over that you have a convincing reason why I shouldn't, let me know in the comments below. At first I was confused with why Uzumaki is positioned to be one of the most popular anime, and then I saw the trailer. You can feel the weird and sinister sensations radiate through its animation that is distinctively different from generic slop we see so often. The manga is one of the most popular of all time by Junji Ito, no doubt a name immediately recognized for being a master of the horror genre. I think the worry I have going into Uzumaki Spiral into Horror is how well it'll translate into an anime, especially when considering how his other works haven't been well received. It's quite difficult to visually evoke the same emotion a mind racing can, but I have enough confidence to put this into solid tier. The healer who was banished from his party is in fact the strongest. This looks to be a bad anime. Maybe it can cap out at average, but nothing gives me the impression it can. The synopsis is very generic, with the trope of the main character getting kicked from their party but secretly being good. Everything else points to a similar experience we've already had with Banished from the Hero's Party, I Decide to Live Out a Quiet Life in the Countryside, combined with The Great Cleric. When looking at the trailers, I had the same opinion where nothing stands out. If you're a massive Sword Art Online fan, especially the Gun Gale Online arc, then you've probably seen the Sword Art Online alternative Gun Gale Online. I don't recall this being a standout that I wanted to see much more of, but after 6 years, they've decided to release a sequel. I'll say average. Before I place a bunch of the anime with little interest in a skip, I do take a look at the cover image and maybe a little bit of the synopsis and see if they appeal to me in any way. Haigakura was one of these shows, where I liked the aesthetic on display but nothing else really grabbed my attention, and the trailer didn't excite me. I'll give it a chance, but Haigakura has something to prove. Goodbye Dragon Life doesn't have a great synopsis or trailers that catch the eye, but the animation doesn't look too generic. I guess the most appealing thing about this anime is that despite it being a fantasy reincarnation one, at least it's not the millionth demon lord being reincarnated, so I'll take this as a win. Let's drop it in an average, though I could see in the future it being a bad anime due to one or two elements of the trailers. I was recently talking with a friend and they had an interesting take. You're kind of a battle shonen hater, and they might be right. However, that doesn't apply to Bleach Thousand Year Blood War, The Conflict. Bleach doesn't make my top 5 for shonen, but it's right outside that. I've consistently had the Thousand Year Blood War seasons as one of the top anime as they're airing, and there's been more to praise than to criticize. Yuhaba is an amazing antagonist, and somehow Bleach finds a way to juggle a massive cast of characters that all have meaningful decisions that progress the plot. The lack of stakes is often my biggest criticism of battle shonen, and here you see the complete opposite. Yamamoto, Byakuya, Komomaru are just some of the many that make Bleach so memorable. With that said, of course this is a banger. Yakuza Fiancé appears to be something in between Nisekoi, The Way of the House Husband, and A Girl and Her Guard Dog, except you won't have to go to jail if you watch more than one episode in regards to that last reference.
Hey yo, what the f?
I can't figure out how I feel about the animation once looking at the trailers. Sometimes it looks beautiful, and other times it looks like trash. Yakuza Fiancé has a lot to prove, but maybe, just maybe, there's a plot here to carry it forward. Orb on the Movements of the Earth looks to be a historical anime exploring the lies of the medieval ages, especially that the earth is flat. I really don't like the cover images. The main one is super messy with the science text behind Raffle, and the second one is just terrible. I do find that I like historical anime a lot of the time, including the less popular ones during a season, so I'll place this into something to prove. Demon Lord 2099 has pretty much everything I could ask for from an anime with not too much community interest that could break away from the pack and reward viewers with a great experience. Stuff such as sci-fi with cyberpunk aesthetic that actually looks good and integrates the fantasy elements without it being too out of place or an eyesore is definitely something that I have interest in. I did mention with Goodbye Dragon Life that I find fantasy reincarnation of a demon lord overdone, so that is a concern I have, but my interest has been piqued. Dark Horse, please do the sci-fi genre proud. You Are Miss Servant leans way too hard into the assassin maid aesthetic, but they don't know how to do maid things. It does look kinda wholesome, but will it fall prey to Yuki being knockoff Your Forger, or is this something of substance? Something to prove. ReZero, oh how I've missed you. With the endless supply of isekai thrown at seasonal viewers to slog through, there are the chosen few that shine like a light at the end of a tunnel. The heavy incorporation of Subaru's trauma from his previous life that he needed to overcome is not done enough in isekai. Stop ignoring who the main character was just to have a self-indulgent power fantasy where they end up having a harem. This destroys the potential that character could have had. We're coming off a high note of ReZero dedicating time in the second season to developing Amelia, who I felt weakened the plot in the first season, and now she's much more of a whole character bringing value to the story. ReZero Starting Life in Another World Season 3 is 100% a banger. At one point, Danmachi was one of the most popular anime. If you were just starting out, everyone would recommend it to you and was at the top of many people's lists, but then the Dark Ages began.
Brother, what's that?
Now, almost a decade later, the interest is a shell of its former self, but those that have stuck with it after season 2 have been rewarded with an ever-increasing in quality show that's had its biggest breakthrough yet, with the second half of season 4 being a complete shift away from the jovial nature Danmachi had for many seasons to showcasing the true nature of the tense and grim realities of the dungeon. Now with the 5th season of Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, the vibe is that now the scheming of the gods and their familiars in Aurorio, especially Freya, will show us a different form of corruption than that of the dungeon. Of course, banger. If you're familiar with my channel and have seen my most recent video, then it's not surprising that I'll be putting the second season of Shangri-La Frontier into the bangers section. This is the new standard for video game anime in my opinion, especially when it comes to conveying the MMO experience. I look forward to seeing Sunraku take on more unique monsters, form and deepen in-game relationships, and the Utopia developers' vision for the story playing out in Shangri-La Frontier. Ranma 1/2. I'm a big fan of Rumiko Takahashi due to Inuyasha being my first anime, so while I never saw the original, I do think I'll give this a chance. I am hesitant due to the ecchi, but Mappa is involved, and I appreciate the old character design style of the 80s to 90s being used, but with the quality of the more modern era. Something about that old style just feels nice to look at. I'll be placing Ranma 1/2 into solid. Most Notorious Talker runs the world's greatest clan. It should have some more hype, no? I mean, you have Ari Ferrerta all hyped up with Hajime and his gun, so what about Noelle? I'm getting main character vibes similar to Kenji from the Dungeon of Black Company, which was okay, and there was decent animation showcased in the trailers. I'll place this in as something approved since I needed to prove the plot is decent. Yeah, I'll be watching 365 Days to the Wedding. Do I expect it to be solid? Not really. Do I think it'll be bad? Maybe. Looks wholesome, reminds me of the Ice Guy and his cool female colleague, so I'll place it in the average and give it a watch. Dandadan. No doubt you've heard of it. After all, the manga is very popular and well ranked. My introduction to it was the Scamboli Reviews video on the manga, and I've been hyped for it since then. Dandadan feels like a story that Mob Psycho in it takes place in the same wacky supernatural universe, but with a more grounded and less overbearing power element structure. I will be placing this in a bangers with my only caveat being that the visual translation from manga to anime could end up leaving some things to be desired. We're down to 4 anime left, and my patience is down to 1. Loner Life in Another World, Let This Grieving Soul Retire, and The Do-Over Damsel Conquers the Dragon Emperor will be bad anime. Trashy generic trope shows you forget a week after completing, and the character designer for Let This Grieving Soul Retire is
You so freaky ass!
Now, the Blue Wolves of Mibu. As long as Japan pumps out historical anime around the transitionary period from the era of samurais to the modern era with the Shinsengumi, I'll show up to watch them. They don't always perform well, but I like them. Despite being one of the less popular anime going into the season, it would appear the studio put in some level of effort into the animation, which is nice to see. So I'll place this in as something approved. Fall 2024 is a season filled with anime I'm excited for, shows trying to do something distinctively different from the norm, and some things I hope aren't trash. If you've made it to the end of the video, let me know in the comments below you're not a seasonal watcher that goons.